Hi, Roy.
Hey.
Who do you have here?
This Handsome Boy.
Can you
my
talk
pride and
about
joy.
him a little bit?
Yeah. So Handsome Boy is an Amazon puffing snake, Blodgett sulphureus. And I hatched him when I was 16 years old. That was more than 17 years ago. He's still going strong. And special thing about the snake is shortly after I hatched him, I actually stopped keeping reptiles for a while. And he lived in the hands of two other really amazing keepers for 10 years.
Okay.
And then when I got back into reptiles, into herpetoculture, he came back to me. And that's where he'll remain. And he has sired mini clutches of baby Amazon puffing snakes, some of which are actually right here.
Yeah. But there's not many of these around, right?
No, it's just me and one other breeder right now in the country that produce these snakes. And most of them aren't like this. They don't really have this kind of temperament. He has just always been very, very relaxed, very curious. Mm-hmm. And he's just an amazing ambassador for this species of snakes. Just such a mellow snake. He's never tried to bite.
Was he like one of your first snakes that you got into? Yeah.
Yeah. So he was actually part of the first clutch of snakes I ever hatched, and it was a big deal at the time for me because I was a 16-year-old kid living in a trailer park.
Yeah.
Didn't have a lot of means, but I had some pretty cool rare reptiles that I took the best possible care I could of at the time. And I actually got really lucky in that I bought a wild pair of Amazon puffing snakes like Handsome Boy. And the female was gravid. She had a clutch of eggs. Mm-hmm. And that's the clutch that Handsome Boy came from.
Okay.
And when that happened, I was only the second person in the country that had hatched that species. So it was like a life-changing moment for me as like a little kid living in poverty. And I hatched the eggs with a chicken incubator that I checked like 3 times a day for 97 days. And the day that they started hatching, I remember I was getting ready for school. I went to go check the incubator before school, which was my routine. And one of the eggs had pipped. And I just like put down my backpack. And I was like,
no school today.
I'm not going to school today. And I just stayed home and just like watched them hatch pretty much. And I remember just being like really, really aware in that moment that I was one of like very few people who had ever witnessed this species of snake hatch. And I just felt like really aware of the privilege that was, and just how it just felt was like just really magical experience. And so, you know, when I stopped keeping and moved, and I kind of focused more on being a naturalist and kind of field terping and all that stuff for a long time, mm-hmm. I was always kind of thinking about these snakes. I just have like a special, you know, appreciation and connection to them for that reason. And the fact that this guy got to come back to live with me is just like it's a really wild story.
Yeah.
And what's also really amazing is that the keeper who had him before me is an amazing keeper who had been trying to breed him for several years and wasn't successful doing that. And then I've been able to breed him multiple times now. And so that's also great because his genetics get to continue in herpetoculture, and he gets to be a part of the kind of story of ensuring that this species remains, you know, and that's a cool thing.
You know, you're the second or third person today to talk about the privilege of working with these animals.
Yeah.
Not the right, but the privilege.
Yeah.
How magical that is, and what a gift that is.
Yeah.
And it sounds like even as a kid, you know, you recognized like the joy and that beautiful feelings that you had.
Yeah, I think a lot about that, and like I said, I had a kind of rough upbringing in some ways, and sometimes I think back about like what kept me well in spite of what was happening in my life at that time, which was pretty hard in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think that it was honestly that I spent a lot of time with animals and a lot of time with reptiles in particular. And there's something about, I think, that often goes underrated with it, is that a lot of people talk about how it's really powerful to keep animals because they require you to be present and they require you to be attentive, they give you focus, stuff like that. But I think that what's something that gets overlooked a lot of times is that they're also giving you presence. It's not a one-way street. And I think that especially if you're a sensitive keeper and if you're aware of your animals and if you want to have a good relationship with your animals, being aware of how they're responding to you and being aware of the way in which they're present with you is another gift, another aspect of that gift. And that's something I also think that all of us as people, as animals ourselves, long for on some level, whether we're aware of it or not, and I think a lot of people recognize that, in their pet dogs and in their cats,
right,
and stuff like that. But I think that it's harder to recognize sometimes in reptiles because they're just more different from us. They're further away, but
that doesn't mean it's not there.
Exactly, it doesn't mean it's not there. And you can see this guy is, he's curious. He is very inquisitive about what's going on right now, but there's no defensiveness or fear at all, in his demeanor.
Nope.
And I think that has a lot to do with just like he's had really good positive experiences with people and interactions with people in his life.
Yeah.
And so even in this environment, which
it's pretty
for
chaotic.
A lot of animals, myself included, is a little overwhelming. He's managing to, remain curious about it all, which is really cool.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I bring him to these events. I come to this show once a year. It's the only show I come to, and I brought Handsome Boy both times I've come, and a lot of that is just because I think it's a rich and rewarding thing for people to interact with a snake like this, because they remain a really, really rare species, and even if people have seen this species before, they haven't seen this species like this before.
Right.
So
look at
it's
that
a special
iridescence too. Beautiful.
Yeah, he's actually so shiny and iridescent, despite being 17 years old.
Oh.
He's still really shiny and healthy. And we've been joking because a couple of people have actually asked if I oil him.
Oh, what?
Because he's so shiny. But that's actually just how he is.
What is one of the most soothing parts of keeping for you?
Such a good question. I think a lot of it is, again, that demand for presence. Like when I'm doing maintenance and care for the animals, there's something I talk about this sometimes in podcasts and stuff about this kind of tinkering thing that I think us herp keepers do a lot, where we're just kind of like quietly, slowly responding to the needs of our animals. We're cleaning water bowls, we're pruning plants that might be getting overgrown in the enclosure, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a very ancient human impulse. This instinct toward adaptive management is what I call it. But like being in a dynamic interplay with our environments.
Yeah.
And I think that herpetoculture meets that longing in us, and that need to be present with the animals to ensure that we're doing it in a way that is respectful to them and sensitive to their needs and their responses to things. I think that the call to do that is a really good way to just like let everything else fall away and just really focus.
Yeah.
And as someone who's neurodivergent and can sometimes struggle with that, I really appreciate things that call that out of me. And sometimes it's exercise, sometimes it's working on a craft. Working with reptiles meets that same thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you're neurodivergent, as far as ADHD goes, at least being mindful can be very hard sometimes.
Totally.
And I think he shows us how to be mindful.
Totally, and I think that there's a way in which I call it a bypass of our defenses. It bypasses like this part. It like impacts us below the brain, and that's really helpful because it's really hard to think your way out of those kinds of its challenges and struggles.
Right.
But if you can find a way to like get below your brain into your body in a different way, that really helps. And I think that, again, like even just like holding this guy, the way he feels, his textures, everything, you know, it's part of that for me. So it really is just such a huge, amazing gift to get to work with animals like this. And you know, I'm constantly striving to do it better, you know, and try and provide more for them, and to allow them to also like express what they are and who they are. And you know, that also for me looks like trying to replicate the environments that they come from as well as I can, so that they can actually express their innate behaviors.
Yeah.
There have been all kinds of cool things that I've observed with these guys because of that. Like drinking out of bromeliads, you know, as their water vessels.
That's so cool.
Yeah, stuff like that. That, you know, the first time I saw it, I was like, that is so beautiful and amazing. And also, of course, it makes perfect sense. But those kinds of things you would just never see.
But you're not going to see that if you just have just a plain old box.
Exactly.
You know?
And sometimes I think that people talk about animals being boring because the animals themselves are bored.
Yeah, that's a really great point.
You know, and it's like if they have more to explore and interact with, they're going to be more interested.
Yeah,
and they're going to be more interactive.
The whole pet rock thing bothers me a lot of times. I mean, I do have one snake that he really doesn't move often at all. Yeah. He has plenty of options to do so, but in general, that statement kind of bothers me. Totally. Because I think most of the time it's really not true. Yeah. That they just need more. Yeah, they just need more, and they need more change, and and we need to stimulate their brains. Yeah. You know, and if we don't, just like humans, if you don't use your brain, it doesn't get developed. Your synapses don't, you know? Exactly. Totally. So, it's a real issue. And that's one of the another things I really like about like keeping live plants with them is that those are changing all the time. So like, it's one thing I've actually seen this guy many times, like when a new leaf is forming, they're very soft and they're very fragrant. And he'll come up and he'll like smell these new leaves when they're in that really delicate, fragrant place. And like also I've seen like some of the bromeliads will actually create an inflorescence of flowers every once in a while, and he'll check them out, you know, and that's so cool. That's a really cool thing because that's a natural thing that they would be curious about and interested in. Oh, handsome boy, you're so handsome. Yeah, he's the best. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me. I really appreciate it. And it's an honor. Thank you, buddy. It's so good to see you again. That tongue. Oh, that tongue. Please make sure to follow Roy on Instagram at Wellspring Herpetoculture and check out his incredible podcast, Project Herpetoculture, which is on the Animals at Home Network on YouTube and Spotify.